welcome back to NOBULL. I am Julian Moffit. I will be your host. Thank you all for tuning in this week. Thank you for the people who tuned in last week for the pilot show. Even the people who didn't like the show, gave me some dislikes. I appreciate it, even though you still watched. This week we're going to get into some immigration topics. I wanted to really touch on that because it was in the news. It was all you could see this week. It was what was going on with our immigration policy under President Trump. A lot of people tried to, say that why was everyone so upset at what Trump was doing? Obama had some hardline immigration policies too. So we'll get into all that. We'll kind of try to dispel some myths that are going around, and we'll also have some other news for you after we touch on immigration. So make sure you guys stay tuned. All right, everyone. So unless you've been under a rock, like I said last week, the one thing in the news this week that you probably even saw all over your social media time feeds was the child separation issue that was going on with Trump's immigration policy. First things first, let's get some facts out of the way. From October 17 to April 18 of this year, about 400 children were removed from their parents as they crossed the border illegally to come over seeking asylum or for whatever other issues. Now, let's get this straight. During Obama's administration, he did separate children from their parents sometimes. Those cases had to do with either them not being able to understand if that parent was actually related to that child, or if that child was in danger by being with someone that possibly wasn't their parent. Okay, so essentially what had happened is that Trump's administration took a different implementation of the law because Obama, after receiving some pushback from some immigrant rights groups, tried to soften his policy so that children were able to be detained, unfortunately, indefinitely, but still with their parents. The biggest thing about Trump and his immigration policies is that we see Trump's rhetoric kind of gets a little dicey sometimes, with the MS-13, calling them animals, and saying that Mexicans are only rapists and murderers. It's kind of one of those things where it's pretty easy, because he's so ambiguous about it, for him to conflate those words and for them to get misconstrued in the press. But one thing's for sure is that he's definitely a hardliner on immigration. All he talks about is the criminal element of people that are trying to come here and doesn't speak on the people seeking asylum. The Marshall Project, which was a large-scale study done by 4 universities of 200 metropolitan areas, saw that even though that immigrants increased in population between 1980 and 2016, that violent crime went down 36%. So that study is either showing that there's not a correlation between immigrants or violent crime, or that even immigrants, aren't necessarily a root cause to crime being higher for whatever reason. The biggest thing about this policy is that essentially what we've done, because we have closed off some ports of entry. You can look that up for yourself, fact check that. But there are people at ports of entry that are being turned away. And in turn, after you make this 2,000 something mile journey from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, at the very end of that journey, if you're turned away, what are people going to do? Especially if they think that they're seeking asylum in America for righteous reasons. They're going to hop on a raft or something like that and cross the Rio Grande, or they're going to try to cross through the desert. And then they get picked up by Border Patrol. And we've started prosecuting every single one of these cases. There were 1,000 immigration cases that were prosecuted in McAllen, Texas alone, one where the processing center is for illegal immigrants right now in Texas. And judges and spokespeople for that court said that they just don't have the means to be able to prosecute those cases. They're not able to prosecute the felonious crime cases, people that have been transporting drugs or been running guns or have been trafficking humans across. They're not able to prosecute those because they're dealing with just these misdemeanor cases. You know, ICE being one of those groups that has to deal with immigration, they've cracked down really hard under President Trump. About 37,734 people were arrested without a record in 2017, and about 12 people ended up dying in those ICE detention facilities. There's one thing that we can all agree on. Illegal immigration is a problem. But the thing is, are we prosecuting the right people that we need to be prosecuting, or are we making criminals out of everyone? You know, one of the things that you kind of hear from Trump is that either Democrats are for open borders or Republicans are trying to be hard on immigration. So in turn, there's no in-betweens. Well, like I said, Obama was, held to account for his immigration policies by detaining unaccompanied children. And so what he ended up doing was he ended up starting a pilot program called the Family Case Management Program. And in that program, a social worker was assigned with immigrant families that were here seeking asylum. What they would do is put that person with that social worker. They would give them legal advice on how to get their claim processed through court. And they had a 99% rate of people that came back to hear their court hearings. So all of this talk about you let people go and they don't come back to court, well, there was a program for that, and Trump ended it. So, that's kind of one of those things to where it's like, the fact that what I wanted to get into now is that Trump it's not all about immigration. And this is where I might offend some people. With Trump, you have to think about why it is that he wants to cut legal immigration by 50%. You have to think about why it is that Trump removed protections for refugees that have been here for 10 to 15 plus years. You have to think about why it is that he wants to have American taxpayers fund a border wall that he campaigned that Mexico was going to pay for. And that's where you get into the root of the stalemate on immigration in Congress, because essentially what's happening is that Trump has laid out four platforms for his immigration policy. He wants to end chain migration, as he calls it. He says he wants to give a pathway for dreamers. He says he also wants to end the catch and release program, as he calls it. And then he also said that he wants money for his border wall. Those are the four pillars that he says he wants. Those are the four pillars that Republicans are working from. Now, if you're going to have a compromise on immigration, Democrats have basically told Republicans, we're not accepting any bill that funds the border wall because we don't think that American taxpayers should pay for it. So that's where that stalemate comes in. Republicans tried to pass one of two immigration bills in the House this week, but they didn't even bring it to the floor because Republicans can't agree on what their immigration plan is going to be going forward. So what you're going to see is that this is going to become a talking point for campaigning in the midterms. Republicans are basically going to say that Democrats don't want to fix immigration and they only want open borders, and Democrats are going to say that Republicans won't work with them because they feel like that they just only want to get what they want. Essentially, they say that they're negotiating with political terrorists, and in that sense, we've got 2,300 people being held hostage, young people, children, in facilities and don't know where their parents are, essentially. HHS said that they were going to appoint a person, which they already have a person. His name is Alex Azar. Look him up. He's the HHS secretary, who was nowhere to be found last weekend when all the crap hit the fan on this. The last thing I wanted to talk about when it came to immigration is the conflation of some of the news that you see. Time ran a cover story from the little girl, probably you most have seen her. She was in the dark with her mother while her mother was being searched. So Time used that and a picture of Donald Trump to convey Trump's immigration policy. Now, Time got jumped on because in that story, that little girl actually didn't get separated from her parents. She was still with her mother, but they're still in detention. Now, one thing about this is that Time was trying to convey a message with this picture. And I think they got their message across. But the thing is that they used a picture of a little girl who actually wasn't separated from her parents. Now, while one side of the argument can jump on Time for saying that they didn't completely use factual information for conveying their policy, the other side can also say that Trump and his administration won't allow any pictures or anyone actually to go into these facilities to see these children and take pictures of them to show the conditions. So that's just one of the things out there that's, kind of conflating this issue. Immigration is one of those things that is always going to be a thorn in the side of America. You've got one side that says that we should be doing things that come to immigration out of compassion, and then you have another side that says we should be doing things about immigration that comes from the law and stems from the law only. So Trump eventually this week, he signed his executive order, was in office. Now, one thing about that is that all you heard was that Congress was the only one that was able to fix this policy of separating families from children. And for whatever reason, Trump decided he could fix it through an executive order. So you kind of have to ask yourself a question about that. If Congress was the only one that could fix it, what made him, less than a week after this whole thing blew up, sign an executive order trying to end those policies? Now, this isn't the end of the issue, because what his executive order actually does is it doesn't reunite the 2,300 children that have been away from their parents, and also it doesn't necessarily end the separation agreement or end the family separations. What it does is it tries to challenge the Flores settlement that says you can't keep a child in detention for longer than 20 days. And if they're going to be detaining these children with their families, they have to have a place to detain them, right? With this increase in detentions, with children being separated in one place, the family being separated in another, they need more family detention centers. They have about 3,000 beds that can house family detention units. So what they proposed putting more of these tent cities that they already built, one in Tornillo, Texas, on federal military bases all across the country. So, if you think we don't know what's going on now with this immigration policy, essentially, what do you think is going to happen after they are able to get these people on military bases? Hopefully it really won't have to go that far. Like I said, illegal immigration is an issue, but we cannot continue to conflate people coming here seeking asylum with MS-13, other gang members, and human traffickers, because it does so much damage to the image and the reputation of those people and allows hate to ferment for other people who might not have anything to do. All right, so in other news this week, Trump's ramping up his trade war with China, y'all. And the only thing about that is that I actually agree that China is a bad actor when it comes to trade. We had like a $350-something billion deficit with them last year. But the thing is that Trump isn't just going after China. He's going after the European Union and some of our other allies. Right now, we've got tariffs in place that affect about $100 billion in trade. Eventually, they've proposed $200 billion more of items affected, which in turn is going to be about $307 billion in all proposed of this trade war that we have brewing. China isn't standing down. That's the biggest thing that's, in this negotiation. we're trying to act like we have the upper hand on China, and China's trying to act like we don't. So they proposed 25% tariffs on 545 categories of U.S. products, including soybeans, beef, whiskey, off-road vehicles, all that's set to go into place on July 6th. So we'll just really have to see what happens with that. The U.S. economy is booming right now, but a lot of people are indicating that businesses are starting to tamper their projections down because of this oncoming trade war. So if it does happen, then it could be really detrimental to the U.S. economy. All right, so last week, Stephen Miller, Kirstjen Nielsen, as the rollout of this immigration policy came about, in the news, they decided that they were going to go to some Mexican restaurants and eat some dinner. Well, they basically got booed out of these restaurants and weren't able to enjoy their dinner in peace. Sarah Huckabee Sanders ended up having an issue happen like that with her on Saturday. She was asked to leave the Red Hen in Blacksburg, Virginia, because the owner came out and said that she had given her employees the chance to vote on if they wanted to serve her family or not, and they decided that they'd rather her leave the restaurant. Now, all right, folks, when it comes down to is that we've got an issue right now in this country of people suggesting that they don't have to serve other people, discriminate essentially against people because they don't agree with their views. This goes back as early as 2012 with Joe Biden. There was a place that decided not to serve him, and the GOP praised them. They said that small businesses reserve the right, and they weren't built by the government. They were built by the hands of private people or private owners, and that they reserve the right to be able to refuse service to anyone. I mean, you've got the Supreme Court ruling on, people don't have to bake cakes for gay couples and stuff like that. Like, at some point, where does it stop? We've got to essentially come to an understanding that we're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to agree on politics, but we can't make it to a place where we're so polarized that we can't even eat in the same restaurant or say we don't want to serve someone because of their political dealings. So, that's just something we got to chill out on, y'all. All right, Trump advisor Roger Stone said in the news this week that he plans on being indicted soon. Doesn't sound too good for Roger Stone or for Donald Trump, considering Roger Stone is a longtime accomplice and confidant of Donald Trump. The reason why he thinks he'll be indicted is because of conversations he might have had with Guccifer 2.0, the person who put the DNC and Podesta email hacks out there during the election of 2016. So that would be something we have to keep our eye on, because if he does get indicted, that means Mueller has actually completed another arm of his investigation, which is going over the hacks and figuring out who all was involved in that. So stay tuned on that part. All right, and lastly, another Trump associate, Trump's longtime personal attorney and fixer, resigned from the RNC this week. He did it actually while, kind of sending a pretty scathing letter about Trump's immigration policy of separating children from their parents. He basically said because he was the son of immigrants, it kind of hurt him, and, was kind of upset to see that we were essentially continuing a practice that some really dastardly people in our history started. As we all know, Michael Cohen is under investigation right now. Things aren't really looking too good for him, and more than likely he's probably going to be indicted very soon, so we'll have to see where that goes. All right, everybody, and that brings our show to a close this week. Thank you for watching once again. Remember to follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, and make sure you like and subscribe this video. Leave me some comments down below. Like or dislike the video if you didn't. And if you don't like the video, let me know what it is that you have issues with. I'm trying to make sure that I'm encompassing all views here. I don't want to, essentially give you a biased opinion. I just want to give you factual information. So if that's something you have an issue with, then list it down below in the comments and let me know what you think. Thank you guys, and thank you for tuning in to NOBULL.
This is America. Don't got you slipping now.